has this game been in development for?
So Tom Happ started working on it about 5 years ago. It started off actually as a hobby project where he was just deconstructing some of his favorite games from his childhood, more just to see like what parts of the different games would work well together, like a little bit of like Metroid, Contra, Rygar, Ninja Gaiden, even like NES Batman, a whole bunch of games, and taking elements of each one and trying to like design levels that would take advantage of the strengths of each one. And then the more he was doing that, the more kind of all the pieces fell into place and started to become a real game. He started coding it, like after doing all the art and level design, started coding it about 3 years ago. And all of this was while he had a full-time job, so he was working on it nights and weekends. And then about a year ago, a little bit less than a year ago, he quit his day job and to focus on this full-time and get it out the door. So I joined the project about 6 months ago, just helping him out with all the other stuff that is not specifically related to the game development side. So I've been part of the project since then.
Okay. So he has done this as far as development all by himself. There's no outsourcing.
Exactly. So he did the art, animation, music, sound effects, programming, level design, all of that, just one guy for 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did the project start to gain steam and get notoriety?
It probably started. I know last E3 was a big milestone. It won, just to mention one of your competitors, I guess, GameSpot's Best of E3.
Never heard of them.
Never heard. They're an up-and-coming small, mom and pop shop. But yeah, like that really helped put the game on the map. Colin Moriarty also has been a strong advocate for the game. He's been talking a lot. Patrick Klepek also. So a lot of people in the mainstream gaming press really started to notice it, I'd say probably a year or maybe two ago, just because I think having seen so many games over the years, can really tell the difference between like really good pixel art and kind of mediocre pixel art, and really good level design and mediocre. And so they really were like, this is the game we've been waiting for. So it's been really exciting to see their reaction. And then from there, a lot of people have taken notice. Also, Sony has been a huge help. They started, once this became part of their pub fund, they were very good about including it in a lot of their events. Also things like in Target and Best Buy and GameStop, you can find this playable on their kiosks, so a lot of people found out about it that way as well. But which, as a small indie developer of like 2 people, there's no way we could have gotten into Targets nationwide, so Sony's been invaluable in providing that support.
So how did that come about specifically, the Sony involvement?
So Tom was showing the game to a bunch of people. Sony came by and took a look at it and immediately took a liking to it, and reached out to him and asked if he would be interested in joining the Pub Fund program. And the way that works is they, they kind of give it some extra marketing support and also guarantee some level of sales, and then they ask for a little bit of exclusivity in exchange for that. And they've been really good partners for it.
Great. Post-launch, do you plan on expanding to other platforms?
Sure. So it's launching on PS4 on March 31st. We've already announced it will also be coming to Vita. We don't have a release date yet for that. We're waiting on some dev tools from Sony for that. It will also be coming out to Steam shortly after the PS4 version. We haven't announced a date yet, but we hope to be able to announce that fairly soon. And in terms of other consoles and handhelds, we're looking at some options, but nothing to announce yet.
Gotcha. So I assume since the game's been in development for 5 years, development hasn't started. It didn't start on PS4. How has the current generation systems architecture? How has the transition to the new consoles been?
Yeah, it's so it actually started out interestingly enough, as an Xbox Live indie game, and it was developed in XNA, and so later Microsoft actually stopped supporting XNA, and so a group called Monogame created something called Monogame, which is essentially an open source version of XNA. Sony then worked with them to get Monogame supported on PS4, and so that actually made it easy because it's already supported. And the big irony is that even though XNA started with Microsoft, Monogame doesn't work on Xbox One. So that's going to be a big factor in terms of other platforms. Trying to think, what we can support will really be dependent on what can support Monogame, or if it has to be ported to another technology like C++.
Sure. So, in terms of difficulty, Castlevania, Metroidvania style games are notoriously difficult. I know right now there's a speed run going on. How does that scale as the further you get along in the game, not to alienate the player?
Sure. It's actually, in terms of difficulty, the emphasis is on exploration more than challenge in defeating enemies.
Sure.
So there are a lot of enemies to defeat, but as long as you don't try to run and gun it, and you actually kind of plan your attack, you can actually get through it without too much challenge. And also, the challenge obviously escalates the further into the game you go. So if you take your time and explore and find lots of power-ups, by the end of the game, you're leveled up pretty high. You've got more firepower, more health, so you can take down some of those later bosses. But if you're speed running it and you don't care about finding all the power-ups, I know I've tried to go as far as I can without bothering to explore and get all those power-ups. And about halfway through the game, it starts getting really, really difficult. And then I think, okay, this is as far as I can go without backtracking a little bit and finding some of those, that extra health, that extra firepower, different weapons. So it kind of depends on your play style. There's also a hard mode for people who really want that kind of really challenging hardcore experience. But the idea is that the normal mode shouldn't be overpoweringly difficult. It should be a good challenge, but not impossible.
Great. Where did the idea for the art style come from?
Like a lot of the rest of the game, it came from inspiration from those classic games that I think I mentioned before, like Contra and Metroid. Tom also, in addition to being trained as a programmer, was trained as an animator, and so pixel art was a passion of his, and getting all the shading and art just right. So that's where a lot of that came from.
Sure.
The tile set kind of approach actually harkens back a lot to Metroid, where you could kind of see the distinct blocks of each tile. You can kind of see like each tile has properties and could do something. So you could later on in the game, pretty early on in the game, you can get a drill, and you can drill through certain blocks, and you can kind of see where those blocks begin and end. So it's a good signal to players about what to expect. And also, he didn't want it to be super obvious about what could be drilled and what couldn't, like in Zelda games. Like if you see a stone with a crack in it, you put a bomb in front of it. And so there are some subtle hints, but a lot of it is just kind of exploring and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Gotcha. In terms of exploring, are there a lot of Easter eggs hidden throughout? Things that players that spend a lot of time will obviously be rewarded finding, I'm guessing.
Yeah. There's a lot of hidden stuff, power-ups, weapons, that kind of thing. There's also a little bit later in the game you'll get something that will allow you to enter codes, secret codes, which will enable certain different attributes of the game that will pop up. There's also, in terms of exploring, there's actually 5 areas every playthrough that are randomly generated, and hidden in different areas that if you find them, it opens up actually a procedurally generated kind of optional area to explore where you'll get a secret weapon. And so to actually see every single weapon in the game, you'll actually have to play through it a few times because some of those will only appear in those secret areas. And so there's a lot of hidden treats throughout the game. One other thing I forgot to mention is that there's one of the things that also kind of harkens back to Tom's youth was he used to like to glitch his games like using Game Genie or swapping out cartridges midway through and seeing like if he could break the game. And so what he did in this game is create something called the address disruptor, which is a tool that you get throughout later in the game. And you can actually glitch certain enemies, or all the enemies will respond to being glitched in different ways. So really encouraging people to experiment by glitching all the enemies, see what they do. Some of them will like freeze and become a platform you can climb up on. Some will give health and just like spew out like lots of health. Others will like go crazy and start, randomly shooting at you. So all kinds of things will happen in different ways. Some will like break through blocks you can't break through on your own. So it encourages a lot of experimentation. We really want people to take time and crannies as they.
I know there's a speedrun option.
Yeah, the speedrun option was designed for people who, after they've already beaten the game, they're really familiar with it, that they can try to speedrun it. And what the speedrun mode does is it strips out all of the story elements, like all the cutscenes and any kind of dialogue, so you're just like always in the gameplay. It also removes all the randomized elements so that all speedrunners can compare themselves across each other evenly, exactly. And then it also has an on-screen timer in the game, which will also kind of flag how you're doing at certain checkpoints. Like whenever you beat a boss, it'll note the time, so you can kind of see like, whether you're ahead of schedule or behind schedule compared to your previous times. So right now here at PAX East, we're doing a speedrun contest for a bunch of people who've never really played the game, so it's a little unfair, but trying to see how quickly they can get to that first checkpoint of beating the first boss. So it's been a lot of fun to watch how quickly people are finding those optimal pathways.
How important is the story to the game?
Oh, it's pretty central to the experience. Obviously, if you just want to get through the game, you can ignore all of the text and everything. It's not a very text-heavy game, so there's only a few points in the game where there's a little bit of the story carrying forward. There's kind of the longest cutscene comes near the halfway point of the game. I won't spoil it, but yeah, there is definitely a story arc. So just very quickly, very briefly, the storyline is that you play a character named Trace. You're a scientist, and in the beginning of the game, you get caught up in a lab accident, and your lab explodes, and then you wake up in this alien world, and you hear a voice telepathically telling you to go find a gun and come help her. And so you start to do that, and through the dialogue with that character, Elsa Nova, you find out a little bit more about your relationship with that world and what your role is in it, and how you can play your role in that world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And music, did he perform the music as well? Or?
Yep.
Oh,
yeah. So he composed all the music himself. That was the one area where he didn't have any prior special training. So just because he was interested in learning about it, he taught himself how to write music. And actually, a lot of people have said that the soundtrack is one of their favorite parts of it. Yeah. So yeah, it turned out really, really well.
Awesome. So what's next after the game's out? What's the end? What are you guys moving on to something else, or post-release content?
Obviously, right after the PS4, we're going to be thinking of Steam and Vita. After that, we're going to play it by ear. I know Tom already has a lot of ideas for a sequel. The story arc, not to give away any spoilers, but as people play through it and learn what's going on in the universe, it actually creates a pretty rich world that could be explored pretty deeply. So I think Tom will already want to start working on some of those ideas that he's been thinking of ever since he started on this one.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking.
Thank you.
The game looks fantastic.
Thank you very much.